The sun was high, burning over the dry alien marketplace. Dust rose with every step, and the wind carried the smell of spices, sweat, and sadness. Crowds moved slowly, eyes hollow, clothes torn. Vendors shouted prices, pushing strange fruits and old machine parts. No one noticed the two small alien girls crouched near a broken pillar. The older girl, thin and bony, hugged something tightly in her hands, a small toy, made from scrap and thread. Beside her sat her little sister, even smaller, her big eyes full of hunger. She didn't cry, only stared at a nearby food stall where hot bread steamed in the air. The older sister looked at her and whispered, "Wait here, little one, I'll get food today." She stood slowly, feet bare, legs shaky, and walked toward the stall. No one made space for her. They pushed and brushed past her like she didn't exist. She reached the food counter and looked up at the grumpy merchant. He barely noticed her until she raised her hands and showed the toy. "I'll give my toy for food," she said softly. The merchant laughed. "That trash? Get lost." Others nearby chuckled, shaking their heads. The girl didn't move, just stood there, holding the toy like it was the most valuable thing in the world. Her lips trembled, but she didn't cry. Then, a voice spoke, not loud, but calm. "I'll take the trade." Everyone turned to see a tall human man standing nearby. He wore old explorer's clothes and a dusty backpack. His eyes weren't cruel, they were quiet, watchful, like he had seen too much in life. He walked forward, looked at the girl, then at the toy in her hands. It was simple, made of wire and cloth, shaped like a tiny animal. He bent down and gently took it from her hands. She flinched, but didn't pull away. Then he reached into his bag and pulled out a food packet. Real, fresh, warm. He placed the food into her hands and said nothing. She stared at it, then back at him, confused. She opened the packet slowly, sniffed it, and her eyes widened. Without a word, she turned and ran back to her sister. The human watched as she sat beside the little one and broke the food in half. She didn't eat first. She gave the bigger piece to her sister. The younger girl smiled, took a bite, and leaned against her. The older one finally took a small bite, chewing slowly like it was the first meal she had in days. The marketplace forgot about them quickly, but the human didn't. He stood there, holding the toy, staring at it like it told him a story. He walked closer again, crouched near them, and placed the toy beside the girl. "I don't need this," he said. "It belongs with you." The girl looked up, her mouth full, eyes wide. "No trade?" she asked. He shook his head. "No trade." She held the toy to her chest tightly, as if afraid someone might take it again. Then she whispered, "Thank you." The man sat on a nearby crate, not far, just close enough to keep an eye. He didn't know why, but something about those girls made his chest feel heavy. He watched the way the older girl patted her sister's back, watched how she smiled even while staying hungry herself. It reminded him of something, or someone, he had lost long ago. As the crowd moved and the sun started to lower, the human thought about walking away, continuing his journey. But his legs stayed, and so did his eyes. Something didn't feel right. Why were these girls alone? Where were their parents? Their people? He waited until night fell, then watched as the girls stood and walked away. He followed them from a distance, careful. They moved past alleys, broken ships, and old buildings. Finally, they crawled into a corner behind a rusted crate. They laid down on a piece of cloth, hugging each other, shivering under the cold stars. The human stood there, hidden in the shadow. Heart-twisting, they were sleeping under open sky, alone, no protection, no food left. He turned and walked away, but only for a few steps. Then he turned back, pulled out another food pack, and left it near their crate quietly. The older girl didn't see him, but she reached out in her sleep and touched the packet. That night, the human didn't sleep in his rented room. He sat on a rooftop, watching the street corner where they slept. Holding the toy in his hands again, he whispered to himself, "This isn't just a toy. It's a cry for help." And he wasn't going to ignore it. Morning light stretched across the broken streets of the alien district. The sun was softer now, but the world still felt cold. The human man stood in line at a small food stall, quietly ordering 2 warm bowls of soup and some fruit bread. He wasn't hungry, not yet. His eyes stayed on the alley where 2 little shapes were still curled up together under the rusted crate. He walked toward them slowly, careful not to scare them. The older girl sat up first, eyes blinking fast, one arm still wrapped around her sister. She spotted the human and froze, unsure if she should run or stay. He stopped a few feet away and crouched down, placing the bowls on the ground. "I brought breakfast," he said softly. "No trade, no price." The little one sat up now, rubbing her eyes, her nose red from the night wind. The smell of the soup reached them, and both girls stared at the bowls like it was a dream. Still, they didn't move. The man understood. He stood up and stepped back, giving them space. Only then did the older sister crawl forward, eyes never leaving him. She sniffed the bowl, then picked it up slowly. She handed it to the little one first, who smiled brightly and began sipping the soup with small slurps. The older girl took the second bowl, but waited, watching her sister eat. Even now, she put her sibling first. The human watched from a few feet away, arms crossed, heart heavy. He had seen many things in his travels, many species, many strange cultures. But this was simple, pure, pain-few. A love. He wanted to ask questions, but something told him not yet, so he just sat nearby, letting them finish. After a while, the older girl wiped her mouth and stood. She walked to him, holding the empty bowl in both hands like it was treasure. She bowed slightly and whispered, "Thank you." Then she did something unexpected. She tried to hand him the toy again. He smiled and shook his head. "No, little one, you keep it." She looked confused. "But you gave food." "I didn't do it for the toy," he said. "I did it because you matter." Her lips trembled, like the words were too heavy for her to understand. She looked at her sister, then back at him, unsure what to say. No one had ever treated them like that before. "What's your name?" the man asked gently. She hesitated, then said, "Lyra." He nodded. "And your sister?" "Mika," she replied. "She doesn't talk much." He smiled. "That's okay. I'm Ray." Ray stood and pulled a small blanket from his bag, handing it to her. "Take this for tonight," he said. "It will help." Lyra took it with shaking hands, her eyes never leaving his face. She nodded slowly, still unsure if this was real or another cruel trick. Ray didn't push. He just walked away again. That day, he asked around the marketplace about the 2 girls. Most people shrugged, said they showed up weeks ago after a colony transport crash. No parents, no one claimed them, just 2 starving mouths no one wanted to feed. "Too many strays," a vendor had said coldly. "They don't last long here." Ray's jaw tightened at those words, fists clenched in his pockets. He spent the afternoon finding small things. More food, another blanket, clean water. He returned to the alley at dusk and found them still there. Lyra jumped when she saw him but relaxed when she recognized his face. Mika peeked out from behind the crate, holding the toy tightly in her arms. They looked less sky-hard now but still thin, still tired. Ray handed Lyra a small wrapped package. She opened it and gasped. It was soft fruit bread, still warm. Her eyes watered, but she quickly looked away, hiding. Mika crawled out, and together they sat on the ground and ate again. Ray just sat beside them, quiet, calm, solid. As they finished, Ray asked, "Where do you sleep when it rains?" Lyra looked up, confused. "Nowhere." He nodded. "Would you like somewhere safe?" Lyra paused, unsure if it was a trick. "Why?" she whispered. "Why do you help us?" Ray didn't answer right away. He stared at the stars starting to appear above. Then he said, "Because once, someone helped me when I had nothing." Lyra blinked, trying to understand that kind of kindness. "Can we stay with you?" she finally asked, voice small and scared. Ray smiled softly. "If you want to." Mika looked at Lyra, and for the first time, she spoke in a tiny voice. "Safe?" Lyra hugged her. "Maybe. And that, maybe, was more hope than they'd had in a long time. That night, Ray didn't return to his rented room. Instead, he found a warm shelter pod nearby and used his credits to open it. Lyra and Mika stepped inside slowly, amazed by the soft floor and warm light. They didn't talk much, they just curled up together and fell asleep fast. Ray sat in the corner, watching them breathe. In his hand, he still held the little toy. He had kept it after all, not because he wanted it, but because it reminded him of why he couldn't walk away anymore. Night covered the streets like a blanket of smoke. Most of the market had gone quiet. Shops shut, lights low, but not all shadows were empty. Some moved, slithered, and watched with hungry eyes. And in the darkest corners, danger waited. Inside the small shelter pod, Lyra and Mika slept peacefully. Mika held the little toy close to her chest, breathing softly. Lyra wrapped one arm protectively around her sister, even in her dreams. Ray sat in the far corner, eyes half closed but never fully asleep. Something didn't feel right, and he had learned to trust that feeling. Yes. Later that evening, while buying fruit packs, Ray had noticed a strange man watching him. Long coat, sharp eyes, and a smile too wide. He had leaned against a wall as if waiting for something. Or someone. And when Ray left, he could feel that man's gaze following him. Now, in the silence of the pod, Ray replayed every step in his head. Outside, in the dark alleys beyond the pod, the man from before whispered into a small comm device. "Confirmed," he said. "Human picked up the 2 females." Another voice replied, harsh and low. "They were promised to the buyer at Station Black." "They won't be there long," the man said with a grin. "We'll move tonight." Ray stood up quietly, stepped to the door, and looked through the narrow slot. His eyes scanned the alley, the rooftops, the shadows. Nothing moved, but the feeling in his gut grew colder. He went back to the girls, knelt beside Lyra, and whispered, "Wake up, just in case." Her eyes snapped open immediately. Years of fear had trained her to never sleep too deep. "What's wrong?" she asked in a hushed voice. "I don't know yet," Ray replied, "but I want you both to stay close." He gently woke Mika, who mumbled but didn't cry. Ray packed the food, pulled his small emergency blaster from his bag, and listened. Still nothing, but that was the worst sign of all. Just as Ray reached for the door, he heard it. A soft click, the sound of a device locking from the outside, then the smell, sharp, chemical, seeping through the air vents. "Gas!" he shouted, pulling off his jacket and covering the vent. "Cover your faces!" he told the girls, handing them cloth. They coughed and trembled as the air grew thick. Ray kicked the emergency release panel, once, twice, then it snapped open. He grabbed both girls and pulled them through the hatch. They fell into the alley outside, lungs gasping for fresh air. But they weren't alone. 3 figures blocked the exit, wearing masks and carrying shock rods. One pointed. "The girls, take them alive." Ray stepped in front of Lyra and Mika, raising his blaster. "Back off," he warned, voice cold. The men laughed. "That toy isn't real weapon." Ray fired once, clean and fast. The shot struck one attacker in the leg, and he collapsed with a scream. The other 2 charged forward, but Ray didn't flinch. He grabbed a metal pipe from the ground and swung hard. It cracked against a helmet, sparks flying, and the man dropped. The third one lunged, grabbing Lyra's arm. She screamed and kicked, but the man dragged her back. Ray turned, fired again, but the shot missed. Suddenly, Mika did something small, but powerful. She threw the toy at the man's face. It hit him right in the eyes, a shock more emotional than physical. He staggered, and in that split second, Ray tackled him from behind. They rolled across the ground, fists flying. Ray fought like a wild animal, protecting something that was his. He didn't stop until the man lay groaning in the dirt. Lyra ran to Mika, hugging her tightly, both crying. Ray stood slowly, blood on his knuckles, chest heaving. He looked at the attackers. 2 unconscious, one limping away into the dark. He could chase him, but the girls came first. "Are you hurt?" he asked, kneeling beside them. Lyra shook her head, but her eyes were wide with fear. "Why do they want us?" she whispered. Ray didn't lie. Because they see you as property, not people. Mika clung to his arm, silent but shaking. Ray took a deep breath and said, "We're not staying here." He lifted Mika into his arms, took Lyra's hand, and ran. They didn't stop until they reached the edge of the district. A transport hub lit by blue lights stood ahead. Ray approached a rental transport and keyed in stolen credits from the attacker's chips. The doors opened, and they climbed inside. As the transport flew away, Lyra stared out the window. "What now?" she asked. Ray looked at both of them, bruised but safe. "Now," he said softly, "I take you somewhere they can never find you." And somewhere deep inside, he made a promise. He would never let anyone touch them again, no matter what it cost. The transport moved fast, cutting through the fog above the outer slums. Inside, Lyra and Mika huddled close together, wrapped in a single blanket. Ray sat beside them, quiet, watching the city lights fade behind them. His jaw was tight, his mind racing. He had saved them, for now. But the fight wasn't over. They landed far from the market, near the edge of the rust fields, a forgotten zone where broken ships and stolen goods were dumped. Ray knew the area from old maps. No cameras, no patrols, just junk, dirt, and people hiding things no one should see. He didn't like coming here, but if someone took other kids too, this was the place. He left the girls inside a small abandoned container with a locked door. "Don't open it unless it's me," he said firmly. "I'll be back soon." Lyra nodded, holding Mika close. Her eyes were full of worry, but she trusted him now. Just enough. Ray stepped out into the shadows alone. The deeper he walked, the worse the air smelled. Burnt oil, rust, and something else. Something that made his stomach twist. He followed the sounds. Metal clanking, low voices, footsteps in gravel. He moved carefully, sticking to the shadows, and then he saw it. A large wrecked ship sat in the center of the field, patched with metal sheets and powered by stolen cables. Two guards stood near the main entrance, carrying long rods with electric tips. Behind them, a cage door opened briefly, and a flash of movement came from inside. Small hands, frightened eyes, and soft whimpers. Children locked up like animals. Ray's hands clenched into fists. He moved to the side, climbing through broken hulls and ducking under low wires. He found a back entrance, half open, half guarded. A man stood there, smoking, bored. Ray didn't hesitate. He stepped forward from the dark and slammed the metal pipe into the man's head. The guard dropped instantly. Ray pulled him into the shadows, took his ID chip and weapon. He walked inside, heart pounding, every step. Silent. The hallway was narrow, flickering lights overhead. Voices echoed ahead. Men laughing, counting credits, planning deliveries. He passed an open door and froze. Inside, a small girl was crying, her face pressed against metal bars. Next to her was a cage. Inside were Lyra and Mika, held tight together, eyes red from tears. Ray's heart stopped. Somehow, while he was scouting, someone had found them and brought them here. He bit back a growl of rage. One of the slavers walked over and tapped the bars with a stick. "You'll fetch a high price," he sneered. "Cute ones always do." Mika whimpered and pulled back. Ray couldn't wait any longer. He stepped through the doorway, fast and brutal. The first man didn't even scream. Ray's punch knocked him out cold. The second man raised a weapon, but Ray tackled him into the wall. They crashed hard, metal bending. Ray slammed the rod into his chest and left him twitching on the ground. He ran to the cage, breath sharp. "Lyra, it's me," he said. "I'm getting you out." She reached through the bars. "Ray, they took us when you left." "I know," he said. "I'm sorry." He pulled the stolen ID chip from his pocket and scanned it against the lock. The red light blinked, then turned green. The cage opened with a hiss. Lyra rushed out first, Mika in her arms. Ray hugged them both tightly, then stood. "Stay behind me," he whispered. "We're not done yet." Alarms suddenly blared through the halls. The slavers had noticed the bodies, the broken door. Ray grabbed a rod in one hand and Mika's tiny arm in the other. Lyra followed, holding onto his coat, eyes wide with fear and fire. They ran through the corridors, dodging shouts and flashing lights. One slaver jumped in front of them. Ray swung without thinking. The rod cracked into the man's shoulder, sending him crashing down. Another came from the side. Lyra grabbed a loose pipe essay and hit his leg. He dropped like a sack of metal, screaming. "Good job," Ray said, surprised but proud. They reached the main door, but it was sealed shut. Ray turned, eyes scanning the control panel. He slammed the rod into the circuits. Sparks flew. Metal screeched. The door creaked open, just enough to squeeze through. He pushed the girls out first, then crawled out himself. Outside, chaos spread. Smoke from the wreckage, shouts of retreat, red lights blinking across the field. Ray didn't look back. He just ran. The girls in tow, legs burning, heart racing. They didn't stop until they were deep in the next junk sector. Finally, breathless, they collapsed behind a stack of broken engines. Lyra clutched Mika, both crying, shaking. Ray sat beside them, every part of him sore and bruised. But he was smiling, just a little. They were safe again, for now. "I'm not leaving you ever again," he whispered. Lyra looked up, her voice cracked but sure. "We won't leave you either." Ray nodded, staring at the stars above. Whatever happened next, they'd face it together. The night air was sharp, filled with smoke and fear. Ray pressed his back against a rusted wall, breathing hard. Beside him, Lyra held Mika close, trying to stay quiet. They had escaped the slaver den, but they were not safe yet. Voices echoed behind them, slavers shouting, hunting, furious they had lost their prize. Ray checked the blaster in his hand, the charge nearly empty, one shot left, maybe two if he was lucky. But luck wasn't something he trusted anymore. He turned to the girls, whispering, "We need to keep moving, fast and quiet." Lyra nodded, even though her legs trembled with exhaustion. They moved through the junkyard ruins, climbing over broken engines and cracked ship parts. Every step echoed too loud in the silence. Mika coughed once, and Lyra quickly covered her mouth. Ray motioned for them to crouch behind a large metal crate. He peeked through the gaps and saw 3 armed men scanning the area with bright lights. "They're close," one said. "They can't have gone far." "We'll burn the whole field if we have to," another growled. Ray's jaw tightened. These weren't just kidnappers. They were hunters, trained and cruel, and he knew they wouldn't stop. He looked around, searching for a way out. In the distance, he spotted an old mining vehicle, half buried but still upright. "If we can get to that," he whispered, "we might escape." "But it's broken," Lyra said. "No power." "I'll fix it," Ray said with a confident voice, even if he wasn't sure. They waited until the patrol passed, then ran. The vehicle was tall, metal rusted, but the control panel still blinked faintly. Ray set Mika inside first, then helped Lyra climb up. He opened the side panel and stared at the wires. Most were burnt, but some were usable. He started working, fingers quick, brain focused. Lyra watched him, amazed at how calm he looked even now. Then she saw movement, figures approaching fast from the far side. "They're coming," she whispered in panic. Ray didn't look up. "I just need one more minute." But the enemy didn't give them time. A shot blasted into the ground beside the vehicle. Sparks flying, Mika screamed, and Lyra covered her with her body. Ray jumped in front, firing his last shot. It hit a fuel pipe near the attackers, and the ground exploded into flame. Fire roared up, lighting the night sky with red and orange. The slavers ducked, confused and shouting. Ray didn't wait. He slammed his hand into the control panel, hoping for a miracle. The vehicle sputtered, shook, then roared to life. "Get in!" he yelled. Lyra pulled Mika inside, and Ray jumped into the driver's seat. The mining rig jerked forward, wheels grinding against metal and dust. Slavers ran after them, firing shots. One hit the side window, cracking it, but not breaking through. Ray drove harder, pushing the machine beyond its limits. "Hold on tight!" he shouted as they smashed through a wall of scrap. Metal pieces flew everywhere. Sparks danced in the air. Mika clung to Lyra, her eyes shut tight. Ray guided the vehicle toward the old tunnel on the other side of the yard. It was narrow, but it was the only way out. The slavers fired again, one shot hitting the fuel tank. A warning light flashed red. "Overheat!" Ray gritted his teeth and yelled, "We're almost there!" The tunnel loomed ahead, dark and tight. Ray turned the wheel and drove straight in. The moment they entered, another explosion rocked the vehicle. Fire spilled behind them, swallowing the path they had just crossed. The slavers stopped chasing, afraid of the flames. Inside the tunnel, it was quiet again, only the sound of heavy breathing and soft sobs. Ray slowed the rig, finally stopping in the dark. Lyra looked around, whispering, Did we make it?" Ray nodded slowly, eyes wide, hands shaking now that the danger had passed. Mika looked up, her small voice breaking the silence. "You saved us again." Ray turned to her, placing a hand on her tiny shoulder. "Always." They stayed in the tunnel for a while, resting, breathing, safe. For the moment, Ray stepped outside, checking the damage. The vehicle was barely holding together, but it had done its job. He pulled out a small flashlight and looked around the tunnel. It led to the outskirts, far from slaverlands. When he climbed back inside, Lyra handed him a water pouch. "You need to drink too," she said. Ray smiled, grateful. "Thanks, kid." She sat beside him and whispered, "You fight like a hero." Ray chuckled softly. "I'm just trying to do the right thing." "But no one else did," Lyra said. "Only you." Ray didn't answer. He looked at both girls, scared, dirty, brave, and felt something deep in his chest. They weren't just kids he rescued anymore. They were his responsibility. Now, and he would protect them, no matter how many more fires came next. The tunnel grew quiet. As the mining vehicle cooled, steam hissed from the broken vents, and sparks flickered along its side. Ray leaned back in the driver's seat, his body aching from the crash. Beside him, Lyra sat with Mika wrapped in her arms. The small girl had finally fallen asleep, holding her toy close to her chest. Ray looked at them and exhaled slowly. He had meant to help them once, maybe twice, but things had changed. Now, they weren't just strangers. Now, they were his responsibility, his family. Even if no one had spoken those words out loud, Lyra met his gaze and whispered, "Where do we go now?" Ray thought for a moment, then pointed toward the dim tunnel exit ahead. "There's a quiet sector past this tunnel, far from the black market zones." He paused. "A place with medical shelters and refugee houses." Lyra looked down, stroking Mika's hair. "Will they let us stay?" Ray nodded. "If I vouch for you, they will." They sat in silence for a few minutes. Lyra unwrapped the blanket and covered Ray's shoulders with part of it. "You helped us," she said. "You didn't have to." Ray smiled faintly. "Someone once helped me too, when I had nothing." "Now it's my turn," he added. Soon, Mika stirred and opened her eyes. She blinked sleepily, then reached for Ray's hand. He took it gently, surprised by the warmth in her touch. She didn't speak, but her smile said everything. Trust was growing between them, slowly, like a sunrise in a cold world. Ray stepped out of the vehicle and checked the tunnel again. The slavers wouldn't follow through the wreckage, not after that explosion. But that didn't mean they were safe forever. He had to move, and soon, he returned inside and said, "It's time to go." They walked on foot now, Mika riding on Ray's back. Lyra walked beside him, barefoot, but stronger than she had been before. The tunnel stretched long and narrow, but a soft light glowed at the end. When they stepped out, they were greeted by a sky full of stars and the soft hum of wind farms. The city ahead was quiet, small, and protected by border drones. Ray led them toward the outer gate, where a guard station blinked with blue lights. He approached the scanner and inserted a small ID chip. The machine beeped, then a soft voice spoke. "Identification accepted. Welcome, Mr. Ray Sullen." The gate opened slowly, and the guard on duty stepped forward. He looked at the girls, then back at Ray. "Refugees?" the guard asked. Ray nodded. "They escaped a slaver hold. I brought them here." The guard studied him for a moment, then nodded. "We'll assign you a med pod and private shelter zone." "Thank you," Ray replied. Inside the city zone, everything was cleaner, quieter, safer. Buildings stood tall but gentle, made of soft stone and smooth metal. They were guided to a small shelter dome with a soft light above the door. The inside was warm, with soft bedding, clean water, and real food on the table. Mika looked around in wonder, whispering, "Is this a dream?" Ray knelt beside her. "No dream," he said. "This is your home now." Lyra walked slowly into the room, touching the walls like she couldn't believe they were real. She turned back and asked, "We can stay here?" Ray nodded. "For as long as you want." Tears welled up in her eyes, but she smiled through them. Later that night, Ray sat on the floor while the girls slept in their new beds. He held the small, stitched toy in his hands, turning it slowly. It was old, torn, and simple, but it had power because it reminded him of why he stayed, not out of duty, but out of something deeper: care, love, purpose. A knock came at the door, soft and careful. It was the guard again, this time with a medical worker. She scanned Mika and Lyra, taking quiet notes. "They're underfed, but strong," she said. "With rest and food, they'll recover." Ray thanked her, then added, "Put them under my record. I'll be responsible." The woman blinked. "You're registering as guardian?" Ray looked at the girls, then back at her. "Yes," he said without hesitation. The woman smiled, entering the data. "Then you've given them more than shelter," she said. "You've given them a future." That night, Ray didn't sleep much. He sat by the window, watching the stars and thinking about the past few days. He didn't ask for this life, didn't plan for it, but now he couldn't imagine walking away. He had found something worth protecting, someone worth living for. And when Lyra turned in her bed and whispered in her sleep, "Ray, don't leave," he whispered back without moving, "I won't." He meant every word. Weeks passed, and the city shelter slowly became a true home. Lyra and Mika no longer flinched at footsteps outside. They no longer woke up shaking from nightmares of cages and fire. They smiled now, small at first, but brighter each day. And in the middle of it all was Ray, watching them grow stronger. The shelter unit had been upgraded, thanks to Ray's work in the tech bay. He repaired broken scanners and old drones during the day. At night, he returned home to laughter, to Mika drawing stars on the floor, to Lyra reading old human books with wide eyes. It was a life he never expected, but one he now needed. One afternoon, Lyra called out to Ray with excitement in her voice. "Come look," she said, pulling him by the hand. He followed her into the sleeping area, where Mika sat proudly beside a small display box. Inside it was the old, patched-up toy, now cleaned and gently mended. "What's this?" Ray asked with a soft smile. "It's the heart of our story," Lyra replied. Ray knelt down, looking at the glass case carefully built from scrap and light panels. "You fixed it," he said, almost in awe. "We didn't want to lose it," Lyra said. "It started everything." Ray placed a hand on the glass, quiet for a moment. "This toy," he said, "was your trade for food." Lyra nodded. "And you didn't take it." "Because you mattered more," Ray whispered. They sat beside the case, remembering that dusty day in the market, a day that changed all three of their lives forever. Later that evening, the shelter held a community gathering. Families, guardians, and children gathered under the stars to share food and stories. Ray brought Lyra and Mika, each dressed in clean clothes and holding bowls of warm stew. Some people stared. Humans rarely adopted alien children, but most simply smiled, moved by the quiet bond between them. An elder approached Ray, eyes kind but curious. "You took them in?" she asked, "even knowing the trouble it might bring?" Ray nodded slowly. "Yes." "Why?" the elder asked. "Most just walk past children like them." Ray looked toward Lyra and Mika playing under the lantern lights. "Because I didn't want to be like most," he said. The elder nodded with approval. "Then you've already made your place here." Ray watched the girls laugh, Lyra chasing Mika in circles. There was no fear in their eyes now, only joy. He felt something tighten in his chest, something warm, something right. That night, back at the shelter, Lyra sat beside Ray on the small sofa. Mika had fallen asleep beside the toy's glass case. The soft light from the case glowed like a star. "Ray," Lyra said, her voice quiet. "Yes," he replied, turning to her. "If someone came to take us again, would you fight?" Ray didn't even pause. "Yes," he said firmly. "I'd fight the whole galaxy if I had to." Lyra looked down, her fingers curling into the blanket. Even if it hurt you? Ray leaned in close, placing a hand over hers. I'd rather be hurt than let you be taken. You and Mika, you're not just my responsibility. You're my family now. Lyra blinked fast, holding back tears, but a smile broke through anyway. She leaned against his shoulder, whispering, "Thank you." Ray rested his head gently against hers. For a man who once lived only from job to job, world to world, he had now found something deeper than any mission, a reason to stay, to protect, to love. A few days later, the shelter director arrived with documents. Ray signed them without hesitation. Lyra and Mika were now officially under his care. Citizenship papers, safety IDs, even school access for the girls. As he handed the final form back, the director said, "You've turned this place into more than just shelter." Ray smiled, watching Mika draw stars again with glowing crayons. "She gave her toy for food," he said softly, "but she got a home instead." The director looked at the toy in the case and nodded. "Some trades change everything," Ray agreed. "Yes, they do." That night, they celebrated with a small cake and fizzy drinks. Lyra sang an old song from her homeworld, her voice strong and sweet. Mika danced in circles, giggling every time she tripped. Ray watched them, a quiet smile on his face. His home was full now, not just with life, but with meaning. And every night after, when the lights dimmed and silence settled in, the soft glow of the toy in the glass case reminded them all that hope begins with the smallest gift, that kindness doesn't need a reason, and that family, so say, can be found in the most unexpected places.